Hi everyone, just a quick thing before we get into today's episode. As I'm sure we're all well aware, there's a lot of hate in the world today. Hate towards black and brown communities that have played such a massive part in building our world. Hate towards LGBTQIA+ communities, fueled by certain authors of certain children's novels. The very fact that the word today is even included in that statement is despicable. Let us promote love and inclusivity and stand up for what is right, even when people in power stay rooted in quote-unquote tradition. And if you are looking at the US at the moment and thinking, I'm glad I'm not there, then I'm sorry to tell you that you are part of the problem. Oppression is everywhere in today's society, even in New Zealand and Australia. Let us fight for our brothers, sisters, and everyone in between. Let us accept that we are not perfect and continue to learn and grow into better allies for these communities. Let us be part of the solution. On that note, I have included a list of resources in the description where you can educate yourself on Black Lives Matter and LGBTQIA+ issues. Also, if, like me, you are not in a position to donate financially, just search Stream to Donate on YouTube and you'll find a number of videos in which all of the ad revenue is being donated to various causes. Black Lives Matter, trans lives are valid. And with that, let's get into the 9th episode of Broadway and Other Kiwi Dreams, guest starring Matt Everingham. Hello, welcome to Broadway and Other Kiwi Dreams, a weekly podcast exploring the lives and minds of theatre practitioners in and around the New Zealand performing arts industry. I'm your host, James Shera. Today, I'm joined by music director, conductor, pianist, and composer Matt Everingham. Matt has had a love for music ever since he heard his grandpa playing the piano when he was a toddler. Since then, he has grown into one of the most prolific young artists in New Zealand. Listen in to hear Matt's journey into the world of music. Learn about his experience in studying a double bachelor in music and laws at the University of Canterbury. And of course, we get a glimpse into the life of a music director in New York City. So wherever you are, whatever you're doing, enjoy a conversation with Matt on Broadway and Other Kiwi Dreams. Hey Matt, how's it going?
Hey James, it's great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. How's it going over there in New York?
It's been crazy, but given the circumstances, I'm in the best place I can be right now. I was meant to be home actually in April, coming home for the month, seeing everyone in Christchurch, and getting my visa stamped. Right, the one that's been approved and getting it stamped, so I could come and go more easily. Getting it in the passport, and of course, I had to make the call just to cancel the trip because I would never have been able to make it back. You know what I mean? Yeah, but lucky to have family here, and super lucky to have relatives here. So I ended up leaving New York City for a while, kind of indefinitely for now, and I'm in Louisville, Kentucky, which is the biggest city in Kentucky, and beautiful. It's springtime, and we're in the suburbs, and I'm working, remotely as much as I can, and yeah.
Nice. So obviously, music theatre is a massive part of your life.
Totally.
The first question I was wanting to ask you is, what is your favourite musical? I
was thinking about that actually when you were prepping this, and I'm glad you gave me a heads up because it's the roughest question in the world, right? It's like, what's my favourite album or artist? Yeah. But actually, there is one that. It's a show I've never done, but it's a show I always, I love to play bits of it. Only a few days ago, I was walking through the park listening to it. And that's Sunday in the Park with George. This, one of Sondheim's, I think, one of his best shows. And I think the story, the book, I can relate to a lot. It's all about it, basically the artist's dilemma in life. And the score is just beautiful. It's a beautiful piano part to play from the piano vocal score, and I've been fortunate to do different arrangements of it with friends and concerts and things, and they've always been like kind of highlight moments of taking some of those songs from the show and doing them in concert. So I'd love to eventually do it myself, but yeah, it's always a show I just go back to in terms of listening, and there's just so many layers in it, you know.
Have you seen it before?
No, that's the thing. I've not even seen it. It's never, not in my knowledge, been done, at least while I was aware of, you know, the scene in New Zealand. And certainly Australia's done it in Melbourne, I think. And it was, of course, on Broadway with Jake Gyllenhaal, but I think I was just a little bit too late to New York to see that. I would have loved to see that production.
Totally. I want to talk a bit about childhood and growing up and stuff. So I heard that when you were younger, you would kind of hear your grandfather playing the piano.
Yeah.
And that was kind of what sparked.
That was I think my first experience of the piano. And I'm so glad I had that upbringing because, you know, my granddad was never classically trained. I think he tried some lessons and tried to learn reading and things, but never really took off with it. But he was a brilliant, he could play by ear brilliantly and pick up songs, his popular songs from back in his youth and stuff from the radio that he used to listen to. And he would just have this kind of idiosyncratic kind of stride piano left hand that he would bring out for every song. He picked out all sorts of songs and just while I was a kid, you know, when they were babysitting or whatever, they had a piano at their place and we had a piano at our place. So anytime he was over, he'd usually be on the piano at some point. Yeah, and I kind of saw someone playing by ear and just really making music for the fun of it and the love of it. And yeah, it was a looking back, that was kind of my first taste of it.
Do you think that's like your first memory as a child?
Yeah, I mean, certainly it's one of the strongest. Like I was pretty young. There's photos and, you know, and things of me like 2 or 3 sitting at the piano with them. And yeah, I think certainly music and memory, so it makes remembering things a lot easier. So I think certainly it's one of the, if not the earliest, it's certainly stuck with me all the way through. Yeah.
Sure. You started piano lessons when you were, what, 6 or 7?
Yeah, exactly. I think I was either 6 or 7, closer to 7, I think. Yeah.
Did you kind of pick it up pretty quickly?
Well, you know, I've talked to people about this. I was definitely interested in it from the beginning and wanted to learn. But, you know, there were certainly the first few years of doing your scales and your exams and having to struggle away with practicing. So I think I started like anyone else in that sense. But first of all, I was interested. I think my mum suggested it, but I was certainly keen on the idea, right? And then I think within a reasonably short time frame, I realized that I actually really did enjoy it and I was progressing pretty quickly. And it kind of became my thing, right? People at school knew that I was a pianist and at primary school, and then as I went into like intermediate school and certainly high school, it became like one of the things that defined me, which I loved. And it was like a great way of meeting people and playing with people. So yeah, it wasn't exactly a sit at the piano and all of a sudden it was like all there. But I think in the first few years, I was lucky that I did start to see it taking off and kind of that's what made me go, yeah, I'm going to stick with this. I was also really lucky to have my piano teacher, Laurie Searle, who's sort of a Christchurch legend. He was a great classical pianist, but also loved jazz and loved sort of transcribing contemporary music and would transcribe, you know, arrangements from films and shows and things when I was a young pianist. So he, you know, kept me interested by doing both sides of music rather than just sticking with one kind of formula.
Yeah, it definitely is all about the teacher, eh?
Totally.
Like if they're not passionate about it, you probably wouldn't be where you are today.
And I really do think that, and I stuck with him for many, many years, all the way through school. A lot of people change around, but I just had a great connection with him, and he truly had both sides of the coin because he was a brilliant classical pianist and trained classically, but had this whole other side as well. And that's the thing a lot of people say, oh, wow, you know, it's so great you stuck with it. They say, you know, I never did. And because often it does come down to how it's taught. And I think music teachers can really make or break a young artist's love for it sometimes or belief in themselves because you just don't gel or the way it's taught. But I'm so grateful and lucky to have those two influences kind of early on. Yeah,
totally. In high school, is it true that you picked up saxophone?
I sure did. Yep. I learned sax for about 5 years. And I think I've done one professional gig on the saxophone at sort of the beginning of college. And I really enjoyed it. And, you know, I it's back at home in a wardrobe at my parents' house somewhere.
Collecting dust.
Exactly. I think Mum has been pulling it out occasionally because she's a clarinet player, and I think she started to sort of at least give it some use. But no, I did. I had a great 5 years learning, and I played in some quartets and the orchestra at school. And it was great to learn something else because until that point, I was really just knew one instrument. And it gives you even if you don't stick with it professionally, it just gives you a knowledge about the winds family. And I think learning as a pianist, learning another orchestral instrument is really important because you appreciate how much extra technique and things that you take for granted on the piano, basic breathing, right? All sorts of things, embouchure, tuning. You don't have to sit it down at a piano and you're not always in control of the tuning, right? It's someone else's fault if it's out of tune. But on something like the sax, it's like, nope, that's definitely all in your court. So that was fun. Yeah. And one day I think I'll eventually pick it up again, but I don't think I'll ever I know too many amazing jazz players that I would ever do it professionally.
Yeah, as a conductor as well, it must be invaluable to know about
exactly
other sections.
And that's the thing. And had I had more time, I'd love to, and maybe I will eventually, pick up some basic string playing. I mean, I've studied it orchestration wise and composition wise, studied all the families, but I think I've always thought the cello would be a pretty beautiful thing to play. But again, you have to start from scratch, which is kind of painful.
Yeah, especially if you haven't picked up any strings before.
Right.
So we'll move on to your kind of music study in a second, but I saw that you were dux of your school along with all three of your siblings.
You've done the scoop. You've done the research. That's hilarious.
I typed in Google St. Bede's Matthew Everingham.
Oh, funny. Yeah, well, it isn't a lie. It isn't fake news. That is true.
It must be somewhat genetic at that point, right?
I mean, I guess it's not completely luck. Put it that way. The Star, it might have been the Star, did this hilarious, sort of promote. That's probably what you read. But yeah, I mean, my sisters are super talented, and I envy them. Actually, my real gift was in music, and I got a lot of credit at school, but my sisters one studies physics and music, one is going to be a whiz-bang lawyer, she's a history grad as well, and then Bex, my younger sister, has just started vet school while this whole COVID thing played out. So she's studied, the pre-vet, but wants to be a vet, so they are pretty amazing.
Cool. I was wondering if there's another instrument that you want to learn. You mentioned cello. Is that
I mean, I've always loved the cello. I've loved writing for the cello, and I've been lucky to play alongside some brilliant cellists as an accompanist and things. Yeah, I did the last 5 years was the first of all things, the first show I think I professionally music directed, and the cello parts in that, it's such an interesting orchestration. There's 2 cellos, 2 violins, bass, and acoustic guitar. And when you're listening to the album, it sounds like it's so percussive, right? You just imagine there's a drum kit, but there's no percussion or kit part in that score, and it's
right. Interesting.
All the pit gigs I've done, I've always find myself catching the cellist and charmed by the cello lines and things like Mary Poppins, Les Mis, Wicked. There were some beautiful little bits in there. The other instrument would be of all things probably French horn. Which is kind of niche, but I just think, again, that's one where the tone is this sort of elusive kind of sits sort of somewhere in between, kind of brass and a reedy sound. One of the most difficult things to play, I think. But yeah, again, that's a lot of the time when I'm listening to scores and things, the other things that stick out to me. So yeah, maybe this is the time. This whole situation. We'll try.
You need to source a cello or a French horn first. So now moving on to your study. So you studied a double bachelor at UC.
Yeah, Bachelor of Music and then Bachelor of Laws. And for my sins, I did an honours year. Why? I don't know, but I got asked and offered, which is a great honour. So I thought, let's do it. One of the most difficult years in terms of workload because I was freelancing and things, but it was a 5-year study pathway, and I managed to do that alongside undergrad courses, and I'm glad I did. Having the law side has been, even though I've very much committed to a music career, I'm so glad I did it because in terms of music business and even just basic contracts, I have used it all along the way. Yeah.
It's almost like music and law is kind of, they don't really go together, but I feel like they kind of have a symbiotic relationship.
Totally.
In many ways.
The material you're studying is so different, but there are elements of kind of, and my major was in composition. So like crafting a story and an argument and musically is kind of the whole study of composition, right? And I found that even though law was very much drier and more logic based, but at the same time, like you had to be creative a lot of the time in terms of exams and essays and things. And I liked the kind of left brain, right brain switching from like a composition class to contract law, although I hated contract law. But in the end of my law pathway, I definitely focused on media law and copyright and entertainment. I was fascinated by that, and I still am. And I kind of focused my research on like elements of copyright and law that affects artists and things. And I think I want to keep pursuing that in my whole freelance world. I think I want to try and keep kind of moving into that as well.
What kind of drew you to the law side of things? Were you interested in that side of things in high school and stuff?
Yeah, I think I was like, music was my big passion, but I loved history and English. And the classic cliche is, the careers advisor says, you're good at history, you should go and do law. In fact, they said, oh, you want to do music? Why don't you try something else?
Why don't you get a real job?
But I was like, no, this is what I'm going to do. But sure, if I could do something else with it, whatever. I go, look, well, it can be done, until the pandemic. I've always been interested in politics, especially. And, I used to love kind of criminal type documentaries. And I originally thought being a dreamy human rights lawyer might be an option. In the first year of a music degree at most universities, you do your kind of major papers, and then you also have to fill it out with some other papers from other degrees. So likewise in law, you have to do a few major law papers and then fill out the rest of that first year with other subjects. And so the pathways work together, especially at Canterbury. Other places it was more difficult, which is one of the reasons I stayed. And yeah, I think I've always been a politics nerd. I did love kind of the whole different side of the brain that it kind of makes you use. And again, I wanted to maybe complement my music career with having those skills in terms of like reading contracts, negotiating, knowing about your rights as a composer or a writer or a performer, and I have used it, not like I've sued anyone, but just, negotiating and looking at contracts and being able to make sense of things, and just like the dry things at law school that you never enjoyed, but, tax law and the idea of like how to start a business and all of that. It is useful,
So then you went and did a piano diploma at Trinity College.
Yes. So that's like it's a London-based college, and you work on your concert exam recital, and they send out examiners. So I didn't have to go all the way to London, which I did for other things. But they have an international program, and you work on for a year or 18 months on a big recital, and then have to do it for this one examiner. But yeah, that was my performance side.
Yeah, so the UC side was kind of the composition and...
Yeah, I was playing a lot at UC. As an accompanist, and my performance major friends, they all often use me as an accompanist or to work things. And I performed a lot of in composition. I actually ended up performing a lot anyway, because I was performing my own works and things. But yeah, that Trinity College one was the kind of dedicated study of performance, and that's what they mark it on.
Sure. You're in New York now, which we'll get to in a second, but you had been to New York before, to NYU.
Yes, that was my first trip. Yeah.
Was it a film scoring workshop?
Yes. So that was was it 3 or 4 years into college, I think? Yeah, 2017, first trip to New York. I wanted to visit New York anyway, and I knew I had this visa option and decided, hey, why don't I go over and scout it out? But what else can I do while I'm there? And I apply. I've always been fascinated in film music. And for a while there at college, I thought I wanted to, that was what I wanted to do, and be a film composer. And potentially I could jump into that. Theater and film, they have their connections. So yeah, I applied for the New York University has a bunch of really great summer courses. I think they have a theater one too for actors. They have a classical performance one. They have digital stuff. And then they have like a dedicated film scoring summer workshop, which was amazing. And you have to apply and send in, material and get selected and stuff. So, and they select about 20 people to do an orchestral track. So I chose to do that, where you get to score for an actual orchestra. You get given a cool. short clip over the 10 days. And it's this wild kind of 10 days of furiously writing and editing and recording.
Yeah.
And then they also have 20, I think, about 20, at least when I did it, that did like a hybrid digital music creation with still some recording as well. Yeah, and it was just this most amazing trip. And I have friends in New York that I visited and got to do this workshop and have this remote recording with an orchestra in Prague. They do a lot of this remote studio work, so that we got to score for this orchestra in Prague and be in New York for a month, and it was just this most amazing experience. And I fell in love with New York, frankly, and was like, well, how can I make this? How can I get there long term? And that was the beginning of this whole crazy adventure, I guess.
Sure. Before we get there, I like to ask people what their dream role is, but obviously you don't really perform on stage.
Right.
If you were to perform on stage, what would be your dream role?
Well, I mean, I think I purely on the musician side, I miss conducting a lot. I used to conduct quite a bit at home, separate from the piano. And being a stick conductor again of something like Wicked or Les Mis would just be a dream, in terms of a musical role. Yeah, it would be so great to be on a podium again and with an orchestra. But aside from that, if I had to pick a real role, get out of the pit kind of thing.
Get out of the pit. No, I totally get that. Any musician is performance.
Oh, no, totally. But no, I mean, people often say, you must act. I was like, no, never. And I know it's a thing now, that the musician actor thing, but maybe I'll have to cross that bridge eventually. But I mean, I'm fine with being on stage. But okay, let's say in a dream world that I suddenly am a singer, for example, something like, I don't know, like a Valjean would just be like those pipes, getting to belt that stuff every night would just be hilarious. And just completely unrealistic. But hey, we can dream, right?
It's a dream role. Doesn't have to be realistic.
Yeah, totally.
You've done so much in your career in such a short amount of time. We probably won't touch on everything, but I did want to touch on one of the highlights that you've talked about before is your earthquake memorial composition, Fractures, being played in Westminster Abbey. How did that feel, hearing that being played there? Yeah,
that was, aside from the first New York trip, that was the other single-handedly definitive moment. I know it sounds, hyperbolic, but truly it was that trip, that whole opportunity was just amazing. And especially with our family being so affected by the earthquakes and losing our house, and which has now after the pandemic makes it seem like 20 years ago, but it was 10 years ago almost, right?
Yeah.
That was 2011, and a crazy year at the end of my high school years, and everyone was affected all around Christchurch. But then within a few years, there were all these little silver linings about opportunities and artists, doing amazing things. And so it was, I think, 4 years after that the crazy February earthquake. And I had 2 months before this concert deadline, my head of my music school at the university approached me and said, look, the organ scholar at Westminster Abbey at the time, who was a Canterbury University graduate, is doing a concert on the 22nd of February and wants to have a young composer write a piece as a memorial. And the weight of that opportunity, or the expectations was kind of hit you in the face at first. And then it was only, I think, 2 months away. It was kind of a quick turnaround. So I had to create this piece for the Westminster Abbey pipe organ and give Jeremy the time to practice it. And we managed to have some amazing funding that let me go over there. So I took this piece over and workshopped it, in Westminster Abbey after hours, when no one's normally allowed there. We were in there in the dark, and it was February, so it was winter, and just the lights on up in the I think it's I forget what the name of the part of the building is, but the organ section you're up in the rafters kind of thing.
Hi Matt, Future James here. I believe the word you're looking for is loft.
It's in the middle of that beautiful big cathedral. It was just crazy. And that was February 2015. And it was literally the 4-year anniversary. So we had the concert on the 22nd of February, that weekend. And all these Kiwis showed up in London, all these New Zealanders, who'd heard about it because it had some news coverage, and like an old primary school teacher who was in London at the time showed up, and I had friends, really good friend Hannah Wheeler showed me around the city, and we hung out a bunch, and I had friends from university who were doing their masters over there, and they all came and turned out, and it was just probably one of the most definitive highlights of what I've done so far, for sure.
Totally. Now you're in New York.
Mm-hmm.
What have you been getting up to over there? Obviously, before the pandemic and also now, obviously.
Yep. Well, I get a lot of shit from friends about this. I moved to New York only to spend most of the year working outside of it. But it is true that I moved to New York in April 2019 and started my J1 graduate visa for a year, so a year's working visa. And I spent a good month in New York meeting people and setting things up. And there's a lot of amazing regional theatre around the States. And a lot of it feeds back to New York. You're working with New York people, directors, actors, etc. Being someone who was based in New York, I was hired out of there to go to all these great little regional spots throughout the year. But between them, I was going back to New York and picked up some audition piano, which was a whole experience in itself. Coachings, so I'd have my sublet uptown, and in between these contracts where I'd go out to a theatre for a few months, I'd come back to the city for a few weeks, and it's amazing how much little bits of work there was, because I couldn't commit to sort of large projects there yet. Coachings, rehearsals, and audition work, playing for all sorts of different classes and things. So there's a lot of that work there, and it's great. So I'd go take the train down to Pearl or Ripley or the studios there, and sometimes I wouldn't necessarily know if there was work coming up for the day, but someone would post on some of the forums I'm in, and you can easily be working most of the week back in the day before all this craziness. But look, that's the long game, is to get back there in a couple of months. I'm sheltering with family at the moment in Louisville just to get out of the city, but it's a beautiful place. I just love it so much, and so many friends are still stuck there, and my heart goes out to them, and I Zoom with them all the time. We have our little Friday night drinks over Zoom instead of like on 49th Street. And look, it will come back, and you already see signs of it, slowly recovering. And it will be a while, and it will be hard, but, I didn't invest all this energy and kind of heart in the place not to give up on it. And I think a lot of friends there feel the same. So we'll be back, and look, it's still going to be the top of the world for theatre, forever, in my opinion. Yeah.
Have you been doing stuff during this time? Have you been writing or anything?
Yeah, it's been kind of surprisingly busy. I was planning on coming home in April to New Zealand and basically just having a month off, spending time with family, catching up with you guys, all my mates, after a year of being away. But I decided to come out here and commit to, I knew the remote situation is kind of going to be with us for who knows how long. So I'd always done a little bit of remote stuff from my contracts in other regional places, where I would record for tracks of people and arrangements where people needed them if they approached me. Whereas I got here and sat down and set up a little studio down here in the basement and hired a keyboard from the local shop, and before they all shut, fortunately. So I've been recording all sorts of things. A lot, actors and singers want to do isolation projects. There's a kind of burst of like people wanting to record stuff, and also instead of Audition Piano Live, all the theatre companies are asking for submissions, right? So they need tracks for that. And between the US and people at home, I've picked up remote teaching again. All bits and bobs of all sorts of stuff. It's been surprisingly busy, and I hope it continues. So if anyone needs those things, a little shout out.
Plug it.
Happy to record, arrange, write.
Where can people get in touch?
I have a website that in the time, while we were all sitting around waiting to see what happens, we finally had time to update my website. So that's everinghammusic.com, and there's a music lessons section and a remote music services, which is things like recording, transcribing, arranging, etc. So everinghammusic.com is the website, and my Instagram links to it too, which is just at Matt Everingham.
Great.
Get
in touch.
Thank you. You've
been a part of many productions. Is there a production that really stands out to you as a particularly memorable experience?
Totally. And I'm so lucky, and this whole pandemic really makes you sit down and appreciate what we do for a job. And look back on it and like cherish it, because, you know, you get so busy and it's your job and you're going from gig to gig, and it's easy to kind of, I never take it for granted, but it's easy to just sort of let it go by, right? So yeah, it's been so cool to kind of look back and reconnect with people from different shows over the years. And yeah, for me, like in New Zealand, I think Wicked, we did it together. You know, Wicked was just to be doing this. It was the South Island premiere, I think. And it's the iconic score, and to one of the favorite, I was Keys 1 for that show and assistant MD. So I had a lot of involvement right from the beginning, teaching the cast and made so many friends. You know, like we had such a blast on that show.
Totally.
There was all of that. And then the musical side, and just such a meaty keyboard part too, which was great. So it just kind of had the whole package, really. The last 5 years, the first show I ever MD'd, that was also a highlight. Again, just like the combination of first project. We did it in the foyer of the Court Theatre, and this, like, we kind of rearranged the space. Again, great orchestration, really satisfying piano part, super, you know, challenging for sure, and a great team. You know, it's kind of had ticked all the boxes again. And then since being in the States, my first production was Mary Poppins, which was the second time doing it, but it was my first time as MD for that show. So coming back to it the second time round at my summer theatre last year, that was very, very cool. Again, awesome people, a bunch of amazing friends, and a great score. I know now I'm picking far too many, but since then, I've got the chance to do Next to Normal in Michigan, and that was, again, it's this like a combination for me as a music director is how interesting is the score or the piece, and how well crafted is it. And then as a pianist, I just love beautifully written, complicated piano parts. Kind of nerd off on that. And then, again, that was a beautiful team as well. Smaller cast, a bit like the last 5 years, you know. So it's not like this huge company, but really difficult material in Next to Normal. So we all had to kind of bond over that. And then the last one I'll mention is I had a beautiful time up in Vermont over the winter. I got to have my first white Christmas in this like beautiful part of Vermont, this big ski area, nice equity regional theatre, northern stage. And we did The Sound of Music, and it was once again, great score. I got to play the rehearsal part, and then Keys 2 for that. And I was assistant MD. So I was involved with teaching the kids and running rehearsals and things, and a beautiful company. Like it was Maggie Burrows, who was associate director of My Fair Lady on Broadway, was our director, and she was awesome. Katie, associate choreographer of Hadestown, was our choreographer, and Kirsten Anderson, a good mate of mine now, she was the alternate Eliza in My Fair Lady, and she was our Maria. So, but look, and it was my first real taste of like being quite close to New York in the room, and just realizing how small the world is. And it was like winter, and I got to have a winter Christmas, which for Kiwis is such a weird and awesome thing. Everyone in Vermont's over it by January, but you're like loving it. And yeah, I've had an amazing time seeing parts of the country and doing great shows. Yeah.
Cool. Coming towards the end of the podcast. So the show is called Broadway and Other Kiwi Dreams. Obviously, you're pretty much living that.
Just take out other. For now, I mean, who knows? But for now, yeah.
Do you have any other dreams for the future for yourself?
Yeah, this, again, I've had a lot of time to sit and think, and probably many of us have in the arts especially. And you know, we're all worried about what the future looks like and whether those dreams are going to be there. And I think they still will be. It's just a matter of time. It's all timing and commitment, frankly. So yeah, look, it still is the dream I've done a lot of great regional work, and the long game is to get back to New York, commit to being there long term. And I think what's been working is going in and out and basically doing the work anyway, wherever it is, right? Good shows, good production companies, good theaters, good people, and then networking that back into New York. But yeah, that's the long thing is to be a Broadway music director. And well, first of all, play, sub, and then play, and then But aside from that, you know, as long as I'm doing music as a career in a really fulfilling way, I've always thought doing some film work would be awesome. That was like at high school, that was like a big dream, you know, kind of, I was loved like the big Hollywood cinematic orchestra scores and things. So I'd love to do that too, you know. And you see a lot of crossover in that world now, with a lot of like movie musicals coming out, La La Land, Greatest Showman, all the remakes, you know, Mary Poppins Returns, etc. And a lot, if you look at the credits, a lot of them are the people that have worked on those shows, or you know, have been New York pit musicians, and then arrangers, and then conductors, etc. Yeah, and aside from the music side of things, we've touched on the law side, and I'd love to do something fulfilling with law for artists, whatever that looks like, one thing at a time right now. But I think there's something, I feel like I have something to offer in that eventually. I was actually going to come home and be admitted to the bar because I qualify. So that was going to happen, I think, around Anzac Day. And this week, actually, it was going to be this Friday. Right. I was booked, and my best mate from law school is going to come down and be my sponsor. And look, that'll happen. Yeah. And I want to be able to, never want to quit music, of course, but I think I can offer something else on top of it. The other dream is right now just to get home, just to be able to for this to be over and to be able to come home. Because right now for me, coming home is being stuck in a way. So I'd love for I just like the possibility to keep pursuing it, to stay as a thing. So I'm just waiting it out like everyone, and, things will open up, and it'd be great to just get home, see everyone, retool, and then come back here again. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important to be optimistic.
Yeah, look, I have a friend who's a doctor in Manhattan in an emergency ward and has a little baby, and it's like, man, those are the people we're doing this for. You know what I mean?
Totally.
And New Zealand's doing such a great job of it. And I think as much as the arts are going to suffer and are, but people want to come back again when it's safe, and they will be bursting to go and see live stuff. And so it's like, look, a bit of pain now to help people out, of course, that's what we've got to do,
Definitely. Thank you so much, Matt.
Hey, it's a pleasure. And thank you. This podcast is I feel like it's been something that should have been happening for a while. And I know there's so many amazing other Kiwi friends that would get something from it or should be on it. And I think Kiwis punch above our weight, in this whole industry. Yeah. And for such a small country, it's like the size of one of the smaller states in America. I guess I just encourage people not to give up on studying the arts and pursuing it as a career. Everything bounces back. And, after the wars, there was always, huge amounts of arts and entertainment. The recession, it all bounced back. And then I was thinking the other day, the last flu pandemic, right? Mm-hmm. You had the roaring 20s. So I just think it's easy to get dragged down by it, but I just really think we'll be back. Totally.
Hi everyone. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed learning about Matt and his escapades over on the Great White Way. As you heard in the episode, if you are in need of music services, hit up Matt on his website, everinghammusic.com. You can also find him on Instagram, @MattEveringham. As I said in the intro, I've included some links to resources where you can educate yourself on Black Lives Matter and LGBTQIA+ issues. Let's all do our part today to learn and become better allies for these communities, so that tomorrow looks brighter, more colourful, and more diverse than ever. You can find the podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, as well as on our website. All of those links are in the description. Join me next week as I talk to my arch rival from my year group at NASDA on Broadway and other Kiwi dreams.